Welcome, dear listener. Take a moment to settle in, breathe slowly, let the noise of the world fall away like the receding tide. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of the sea, the last warmth of daylight slipping beneath the horizon, a soft wind carrying the salt and hush of the water. Tonight we journey to the far edges of Britain's shores, to the lighthouses that have guarded these coasts for centuries, silent taste and faithful to their purpose to guide the lost safely home. It is said that every lighthouse has two hearts, one of flame and one of silence. The flame is the light that never fails, and the silence is the keeper's devotion, measured not in hours, but in tides. Let the light turn slowly in your mind, casting its rhythm across the dark sea, a slow heartbeat of gold and glass. Before the age of electricity, the keepers tended great oil lamps, monuments of brass and glass, their lenses polished to perfection. Each evening, as dusk fell, the keeper climbed the narrow spiral of iron steps, lamp trimmers, scissors in hand, ready to coax life into the waiting wick. The lantern would flare, then steady its beam sweeping far over the restless water, and from that moment until dawn, the keeper would watch. Some served alone on remote rocks, tiny islands barely wider than the tower itself. Their world was a circle of sea and sky. For weeks they saw no other soul, their only conversation, the wind through the vents, the cry of a seabird, the whisper of waves breaking far below. They learned to read the moods of the sea, its sighs and tempers, its moments of calm and wrath, and in their solitude they became part of its rhythm. Life as a lighthouse keeper was not for the restless. Supplies came once a month if weather allowed. Letters arrived sodden with salt spray. Sometimes the boat could not reach them for weeks, and they would ration every biscuit, every match, every drop of lamp oil. At night the tower would hum with wind, the lantern panes would tremble, and yet inside the keeper would write in his logbook, each line steady and deliberate. Light shone bright. Wind southwest by west, sea rough, visibility poor. It was their ritual, their conversation with the world beyond. There were, too, the shore-based lights, like those of St. Mary's, Beachy Head, or Eddystone, towers anchored to cliffs and reefs half seen through spray. Families sometimes lived beside them, wives and children sharing the rhythm of isolation. Imagine a small whitewashed cottage, its windows rattling in the wind, the smell of salt and paraffin drifting through the rooms. Children tracing ships on the horizon, waiting for the return of their father's signal. When storms came, the sea would rise in fury. Waves taller than houses crashed upon the rocks, and the air turned to mist and roar. Inside the tower, the keepers braced themselves against the trembling walls, the lantern shuddering overhead, the sound like the heartbeat of the ocean itself. They knew the storm could last for days, but the light must never go out. And when morning came, and the clouds broke, they would step outside to a world scrubbed clean. Gulls crying in the new sunlight, the sea glittering as if nothing had ever been amiss. They would breathe deeply and know they had endured another night. Some say there was a kind of peace in that life, a rhythm too subtle for the hurried world to understand. The sea offered its solitude, the tower its purpose, and between them a person could learn to be still. The keepers became philosophers without knowing it. Their thoughts deepened like tide pools. Their days were not measured by hours, but by the turning of the lamp, the flight of the seabirds, the waxing of the moon. At night, they would sit by the lantern window, watching the horizon fade into darkness. Sometimes a ship's light would appear, a pinprick in the vastness, and they would feel a quiet satisfaction knowing their own light had been seen. But lighthouses were more than solitude. They were beacons of connection, invisible threads binding land to sea, sailor to shore, life to life. The families left behind in the harbours would look out on stormy nights, searching for that familiar beam turning in the distance. It was reassurance that someone somewhere was keeping watch. One of the oldest lights on record is the Hook Lighthouse on Ireland's southeast coast. It has burned for over 8 centuries. Imagine that. 800 years of light, of storms and calm, of wars and peace, of countless generations passing beneath its glow. Its first keepers were monks, their duty not only to guide ships, but to pray for their safety. They tended their beacon with reverence, for each flame was both signal and blessing. Across Britain, from the rugged cliffs of Cornwall to the wind-bitten shores of the Hebrides, lighthouses shared that same quiet devotion. They were temples of patience, their prayers made not in words, but in light. As centuries passed, technology changed. Oil became electricity, wick became filament, and human hands gave way to automated switches. But even so, the spirit of the lighthouse endured, a steady flame that no progress could extinguish. Those who visit them now often describe a strange feeling, a hush that settles as they step inside, as if the walls themselves remember. The iron stairs creak, the air smells faintly of salt and rust, and for a moment you can almost hear footsteps climbing above you and the faint scrape of a match striking in the dark. In that quiet, you sense the weight of all who came before. Keepers who watched through sleepless nights, families who waited by empty windows, sailors who prayed for the light to appear. The sea has taken many of them, and yet somehow their watch continues. As you listen now, perhaps you can picture one of those towers, a lone light turning above the water, its beam sweeping slow and sure, each revolution a breath in the night. It does not hurry, it does not waver, it simply endures. Let that rhythm stay with you now. The turning of the light, the hush between each flash, the whisper of the tide below. And as we travel deeper into the story, we will meet the people behind those towers, keepers who faced tempests and solitude, who carried on even when the world forgot them, who tended their flame, because they believed in something that could outlast darkness. Now, let us climb the spiral stairs once more and see what stories wait above the waves. The stairs wind upward, narrow and cool, the stone worn smooth by generations of boots. Each step feels like an echo of all who came before, men and women who climbed these same turns in every kind of weather, carrying oil cans and logbooks, their breath clouding in the lantern room. At the top, the world expands. Through the glass panes, the sea stretches to the horizon, endless and unknowable. The lamp sits at the center like a patient heart, its great lens waiting to turn, waiting to cast its pulse of light across the dark water. The keeper checks the mechanism, trimming the wick with quiet precision. He knows that even a small mistake can dim the beam, and a dim beam can mean disaster. There is comfort in the ritual, the repetition, the order, the purpose. Outside the wind may rage, but in here there is method. The first flicker of flame catches and steadies. A soft glow fills the glass, growing brighter until the tower seems to breathe. The keeper stands for a moment, watching the reflection of the light on his hands, on the brass fittings, on the walls. Then he opens the vent and lets the beam sweep outward, turning slowly, calmly, endlessly. Far below, waves break against the rocks. The sea roars, but the light holds its rhythm. For those adrift in the distance, that turning beam means hope, a sign that someone is awake, that the coast is near, that home still exists beyond the horizon. Years pass in this way. Keepers come and go, each leaving a trace of themselves, a carved initial in the stairwell, a note tucked inside a drawer, an old pipe on a windowsill. Some towers stand for centuries, their stones absorbing the sound of every storm. They become archives of endurance, built to resist the slow grind of time and tide. In one small lighthouse on the west coast, 2 keepers once kept watch together through a winter so long and fierce that ice formed on the inside of the windows. Supplies could not reach them for weeks. They rationed food, read aloud from the same few books, and took turns winding the mechanism by hand. When at last the supply boat arrived, the crew found the two men seated by the lantern, thin and pale, but still tending the light. They had not let it fail once. There were others who worked alone, on lonely islets like Soul Skerry or Bell Rock, where land disappears beneath high tides. Solitude became both companion and test. Some keepers found peace there, others found only silence that grew too deep. They spoke to the gulls, to the wind, to the ticking of the lamp. They wrote long letters they never sent, and journals filled with weather reports that became confessions. Yet the light stayed steady because that was their purpose, and purpose was enough. Life between shifts was simple. They cleaned, mended, painted, and waited. Rust and salt never rested, so neither could they. When the sea was calm, they might fish from the rocks or sit by the door, staring out at the glittering water. When storms came, they stayed inside and listened to the tower tremble. The sea could make its threats, but the light would not bow. Sometimes a keeper's family lived on the mainland, and every few weeks they would glimpse each other through binoculars, a wife standing on a cliff, a husband waving from the tower. Letters took days to arrive, yet they carried entire worlds within them. Every sentence, every smudge of ink was precious, proof that someone still thought of them beyond the water's edge. When children were born, some grew up with the sea as their lullaby. They learned the names of ships before they could read, and when they visited the lighthouse, their laughter echoed up the spiral stairs. To them, the tower was a playground, the light a living thing that breathed and turned. Many of those children would later join the service themselves, continuing the watch their parents had begun. There were tragedies too. The sea, generous and cruel in equal measure, did not always forgive. There were wrecks that happened within sight of land, where the keepers could only watch, helpless as waves swallowed men and timber alike. They recorded what they saw in the logbook, always spare, always factual, yet behind the careful handwriting lay grief unspoken. In the aftermath, fragments would wash ashore, a piece of hull, a boot, a nameplate. The keepers gathered what they could, sometimes burying small tokens near the tower. There was rarely anyone else to do it. Their duty extended beyond the living. But there were moments of quiet beauty that redeemed all hardship. On still nights, the sea mirrored the sky so perfectly that the horizon vanished. The stars seemed close enough to touch. The turning light became one among them, a slow, deliberate constellation born of human hands. Keepers stood in the lantern room, feeling both infinitesimal and infinite, their heartbeat matching the rotation of the beam. Sometimes whales passed near the rocks, their breath misting silver in the moonlight. Other nights brought meteors or northern lights, weaving green and violet curtains across the sky. Those who lived such lives understood wonder in a way few others could. Not as spectacle, but as quiet company. Years blurred together, the same routines repeated, and yet every day was subtly different. A new colour in the sea, a new tone in the wind. Age crept gently. Some keepers retired inland but returned in dreams, hearing the surf in their sleep. Others could not bear to leave and spent their final years in cottages near the shore, still watching for the flash of their old light in the distance. Then came automation. Machines took over the watch. One by one, the keepers left their stations, carrying only a few belongings and the faint scent of oil and salt in their clothes. The last logbook entries were brief, written with an almost painful restraint. Light automated today. Duty concluded. When the final doors closed, silence settled in the towers. Dust gathered where hands had polished brass for generations. The sea continued its song, but now there was no reply from within. For a while it seemed as though something deeply human had been extinguished, not just the presence of a person, but the spirit of endurance itself. Yet time has a way of softening change. The towers still stand, patient and unyielding. Their lights, now electric and remote, continue to sweep the darkness. The technology is different, but the purpose endures. And if you visit one at dusk, you might feel it, a pulse in the air, faint but familiar, like a memory held in stone. Standing at the foot of a lighthouse today, you can still sense the weight of all those unseen lives. The steps you climb were shaped by their souls. The handrail you touch has been held by countless others who faced storms and solitude. The light you see is the same that once guided sailors through fog and fear, and in that continuity, something sacred remains. As the night deepens, so too does the sea. The light continues to turn, slow and faithful. Its rhythm steadies the world, and you realize that perhaps the true legacy of the lighthouse is not the tower itself, nor even the beam it casts, but the quiet courage of those who believed their small, persistent light could make a difference in the vastness of the dark. Morning comes slowly at the edge of the sea. The first light seeps across the horizon like a pale breath, softening the dark waters until they begin to shine. Mist drifts around the tower, veiling the rocks and blurring the line between sky and ocean. The lighthouse stands unchanged, patient as ever, the keeper's world reduced to greys and silvers. Inside, the smell of metal and salt clings to everything. The walls hold the memory of last night's storm, the faint rattle of glass, the low hum in the stone. The keeper descends the stairs with steady footsteps, boots echoing softly, the logbook tucked beneath one arm. Another night completed, another flame that did not fail. Outside, gulls wheel and cry. The tide pulls away, leaving trails of foam that glisten in the dawn. The keeper watches the horizon for a moment, the lamp behind her slowly dimming as the day takes over. There is comfort in this quiet exchange, light yielding to light. Later, the routine begins again. The lantern is cleaned, its lenses wiped until they gleam like new coins. Every gear is oiled, every surface checked. A lighthouse must always be ready, for storms come without warning, and the sea is never truly at rest. Weeks pass in this rhythm. Days of calm blur into days of wind, but the cycle continues. Sometimes a fishing boat passes close enough for a wave or a shouted greeting. Sometimes nothing at all moves upon the water, and the world seems to hold its breath. The keeper grows accustomed to silence. She hears it in layers, the hush of air through vents, the slow breathing of the sea below, the distant thrum of unseen waves breaking miles away. At night she listens for changes, the subtle signs of a coming storm, or the deep stillness that means one has passed. Silence, she learns, is never empty. It is filled with small, essential sounds. There are stories that drift from lighthouse to lighthouse, passed like folklore between those who once kept watch. One tells of a keeper who rescued a sailor thrown from a wreck onto the rocks below. The man survived the night but vanished before dawn, leaving only a soaked coat on the steps. For years afterward, keepers claimed that on certain nights, when the tide was high and the wind from the north, they saw a figure pacing near the base of the tower, as if still searching for a way home. Another tale speaks of a cat who learned to climb the stairs of its lighthouse, following its keeper every night to the lantern room. When automation came and the keeper left, the cat refused to go. Visitors later said they saw it at dusk, perched by the window, eyes reflecting the beam as it turned. Perhaps these stories are inventions, comforts for those who miss the human presence, but they feel true in spirit. Every light has its ghosts, its echoes, its faithful watchers. In time, the coastlines changed, villages became towns, ships became steel giants, and travel grew faster than the wind itself. Yet the lighthouses remained, outlasting every age. They were built not for a single generation, but for all who would come after. Their endurance is a kind of language, one spoken in stone and flame. When visitors arrive now, they come with cameras and curiosity. They climb the steps slowly, marveling at the narrowness of the tower, the way the air cools with each turn. At the top, they find the world spread out beneath them, endless sea, endless sky, and they fall silent. Something about the height, the isolation, demands respect. It reminds them that these towers were never built for comfort, but for purpose. Guides tell them how the lenses once rotated on baths of mercury, how the wicks were trimmed with surgical care, how every flash pattern was unique so sailors could tell one light from another. Each detail becomes part of the wider story, the quiet intelligence of human craft devoted to safety and service. Visitors listen, then linger at the windows, eyes tracing the beam as it sweeps across the water. They may not say it aloud, but most feel the same thought rise within them. Someone once lived here and gave their life to this light. As dusk returns, the air cools. The tower casts a long shadow over the rocks. The beam awakens again, turning slow circles over the waves. To those on the shore, it looks effortless, but the machinery within hums with life. Even automated, the light has personality, a rhythm learned from centuries of human touch. Standing outside, one can almost sense that presence still. It lingers in the way the door handle gleams where countless hands have turned it, in the faint scrape of grit on the stairs, in the smell of old oil and seawater. Time does not erase such traces, it only softens them. There is a point, somewhere between night and dawn, when the lighthouse seems alive. Not just functioning, but breathing. The beam turns, the sea moves, the clouds drift across the moon, and for a moment the boundaries blur. It is impossible to tell where the human work ends and nature begins. They move together, sharing purpose. Far out at sea, a ship crosses the dark horizon. Its crew might never know the story of the tower whose light they see. They might not imagine the generations who kept it burning, or the storms it survived. But the light reaches them just the same. That is enough. That is the quiet triumph of every keeper who ever lived. As the years roll on, storms batter the coasts, cliffs crumble, sand shifts, and yet the towers endure. Paint flakes from their walls, iron rusts, but their shapes remain. They belong to the landscape now, as much a part of Britain's shores as the tides that lap against them. Some have been turned into museums or small homes. Others stand empty, open to wind and gulls. A few still operate as they always did, their lamps cutting the same steady path through mist and darkness. Each is a chapter in an unfinished story still being written by the sea. When you stand beside one, you might feel that story stirring within you. The air tastes of salt. The wind hums through the railing. And as you look up at the turning light, you sense what generations of keepers felt, that even the smallest flame can hold back an ocean of dark. It is a lesson older than the towers themselves, and it waits patiently for anyone willing to listen. Evening drifts in quietly, the sky deepening to indigo. The horizon fades, the colours dissolve, and the sea becomes a dark mirror. Somewhere far out, the light finds its full strength, its pulse cutting through the gathering mist. The coast grows still. A few gulls settle on the rocks, their calls replaced by the long hush of the tide. The tower stands alone, but never lonely. It has known too many voices, too many storms to be empty. The air hums faintly with memory of footsteps on the stairs, of laughter carried on the wind, of the gentle scrape of metal as the lamp was turned. Each sound lingers in the stone folded into its history. It has become a vessel for human perseverance, built not only from stone and iron, but from devotion. And though no keepers climb its stairs now, the same light still burns. It turns, unhurried, across the sea. Each flash marks another moment of endurance, It is a rhythm that asks for nothing, yet gives reassurance to all who see it. The ships that pass still trust that beam, even if they never think of the hands that once tended it. Trust, after all, is the quiet foundation of every light. Night gathers fully, the stars appear, faint at first, then bright and endless. The lamp above joins them, part of the constellation of human care. It shines not in competition, but in harmony, a reminder that hope can be made by human hands. Along the coastline there are hundreds of such towers, from the granite pillars of Scotland to the red and white guardians of Cornwall. Each has its own story, its own pulse. Some flash every 10 seconds, others every 15, their patterns as distinct as voices. To sailors they are like familiar friends, steady, dependable, always in their place. Imagine the sea at night stretching vast and black. The lights appear one by one, tiny, steadfast sparks along the edge of the world. Together they form an invisible chain around the islands, a circle of safety. A keeper once wrote that to look upon that chain was to see Britain breathing in light. It is a beautiful thought, and perhaps a true one. Inland, life continues in its hurried way. Cities glow with their own restless illumination, their noise spilling into the sky. Yet out here, on the ragged edge where land meets water, light still carries the same meaning it always did: to warn, to guide, to reassure. It is not a show of power, but of care. Sometimes travellers come to the coast just to watch the beam sweep across the water. They stand in silence, coats pulled close, feeling the wind move through their hair. For a moment, they feel connected to something older and steadier than themselves. The long human effort to keep the darkness at bay. The light turns, and they turn with it, as if caught in its rhythm. When they leave, they take that rhythm with them. A quiet pulse that lingers long after the sound of the waves has faded. The sea, of course, will outlast everything. The towers, the stories, even the memory of those who built them. But for now, and for as long as the lamps are tended, the balance holds. Stone meets tide, and light meets night in an unending conversation. That is the secret heart of every lighthouse. Not defiance, but dialogue. And when the storms return, as they always do, the towers stand firm. Waves crash against their walls, rain lashes their windows, and still the light turns. Perhaps that is why people are drawn to them, because they recognize in that endurance something of themselves. The desire to hold steady through uncertainty, to be a small point of clarity in a vast, shifting world. The old keepers knew this instinctively. They did not speak of philosophy or symbolism. They simply did their duty. But through that duty, they left behind a message that vigilance, patience, and care can be acts of quiet greatness. Each rotation of the lamp is a whisper of that truth carried on the wind. Now the tide is full, the night at its deepest. The light turns on, unbroken, across the dark sea. You can almost feel its warmth reaching through the mist, a single steady breath in the vast expanse of water and sky. The beam travels farther than sight, farther than sound. It goes on, long after the watcher has turned away, and so the lighthouses endure. Some are bright with new paint, others crumble slowly back into the earth. But all remain part of the same long story, a story of guardianship and grace. The men and women who tended them may be gone, but their light still burns, crossing generations, crossing oceans. Each flash a reminder that there is strength in constancy, beauty in service, and peace in knowing your place in the world. If you find yourself by the sea one night, pause and look for that beam. Watch how it moves across the waves, patient, deliberate, endless. You might feel the same calm that keepers once felt, the same quiet understanding that even in the wildest storm there is order, there is purpose, and there is light. Take a breath. Let the sound of the water settle around you. Let the wind cool your thoughts. And know that somewhere along some distant shore, a light is still turning, watching, guiding, waiting. The night is deep, but the light remains, and it will remain long after this story fades into silence.